Hey everyone, ready to dive deep? We're talking fair use today and generative AI.
Oh,
Specifically, how this all works with ChatGPT.
I know a little something about that.
You do. You're our expert.
I am.
So we're going to break down the key arguments and explore how copyright law is dealing with this cutting-edge tech like ChatGPT.
Yeah, it's like fitting square pegs into round holes.
Yeah, exactly.
So trying to take centuries-old legal principles
Right.
and apply them to something that's constantly evolving and changing.
Absolutely. Our main source for this deep dive
Yeah.
is a document by Suchir Balaji.
Oh, yeah, I've read that one.
And it really gets into some really interesting stuff.
It does.
For example, did you know that ChatGPT's training might actually be impacting websites like Stack Overflow?
Really?
Like noticeably like a dip in their traffic
Oh, wow.
after ChatGPT was launched.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so we'll unpack that later.
Okay.
But first, we need to lay some groundwork.
Yeah, what even is fair use?
Exactly. So first, we need to understand what fair use actually means.
Right. It's a legal doctrine
Hmm.
that lets you use copyrighted material without getting permission
Right.
from the owner, but only in certain situations.
So it's not a free-for-all.
No, it's definitely not a free-for-all. There are rules.
There are rules, okay.
And the tricky thing is that
Okay.
fair use is determined on a case-by-case basis.
Oh, fun.
There's no magic formula or anything.
Right.
Judges look at 4 main factors to decide if something is fair use.
Okay, 4 factors.
They're outlined in the Copyright Act of 1976.
Right, hit me with them.
So factor 1 is the purpose and character of the use.
Okay, purpose and character of the use.
Basically, are you using it for commercial reasons or nonprofit?
Gotcha.
2 is the nature of the copyrighted work itself.
Okay, the actual work.
Right.
Take.
3, the amount and substantiality of the portion you used.
Okay, how much are you using?
And 4, and this is probably the most important one,
Okay.
is the effect of your use on the potential market for the original work.
Okay, so factor 4, market effects. This is where things get interesting with ChatGPT.
Right.
We've got this super powerful AI
It's true.
that's been trained on tons of data.
So much data.
And now it can answer questions, write code, even tell jokes.
Pretty impressive.
How is that not going to affect the market for the original sources?
That's the question, isn't
Yeah.
it? So ChatGPT's training data isn't actually public knowledge.
Right.
We can't say for sure what it's learned from,
Hmm.
but there are studies that give us some clues.
Okay.
Like that Stack Overflow example we talked about,
Yeah.
remember?
12%,
Their traffic dropped by about 12% after ChatGPT was released.
which is huge.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a pretty clear sign that
Yeah.
people are maybe going straight to ChatGPT
Mm-hmm.
for answers instead of searching through Stack Overflow.
That's what it seems like.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond just website traffic.
Oh, really?
The same study
Okay.
found a dip in the number of new questions being posted on Stack Overflow.
So people aren't even asking questions anymore.
Yeah, they're just going to ChatGPT.
Interesting.
And the average account age
Right.
of people asking questions is going up.
Oh, wow.
So that suggests that fewer new users are joining the community.
Because they're getting their answers from ChatGPT.
Exact.
So it's like ChatGPT is potentially replacing these online communities.
For some people, yeah, it could be.
Wow.
And Stack Overflow is probably not the only site feeling the impact.
Right, right.
Remember, Check the Homework Help website?
Uh-huh.
Their stock took a 40% nosedive
Oh, wow.
after they reported that ChatGPT was messing with their growth.
Ouch.
Yeah, it was not good for them.
So even if ChatGPT wasn't directly trained on these sites,
Right.
it's showing us the kind of market disruption that generative AI can cause.
Absolutely, it's a real concern.
And this is where it gets even more interesting. OpenAI and Google, the companies behind these big language models,
Yeah.
they've actually signed data licensing agreements with companies like Stack Overflow, Reddit, and even the Associated Press
So they are paying.
for the data.
If using that data for training is fair use, why would they need those agreements?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And it suggests they might be acknowledging the potential for market harm.
Okay.
Using all that copyrighted data without similar agreements
Right.
could be seen as depriving the original creators of potential revenue.
Which goes against the whole idea of fair use.
Exactly.
Okay, so we see how ChatGPT could be impacting the market,
Right.
which is a big part of the fair use equation.
Uh-huh.
But doesn't fair use also allow for using copyrighted stuff in certain ways?
It does.
Even if it affects the market.
Mm-hmm.
Like book reviews can quote parts of a book without permission. Right?
You're right. Fair use does have exceptions.
Okay.
It really comes down to
Okay.
whether the use is substituting for the original work
Substituting.
or serving a different purpose.
Okay, substituting versus non-substituting.
Right.
How do we tell the difference? Well, there's legal history to guide us.
Okay.
A key case from way back in 1841,
Wow.
Folsom v. Marsh,
Okay.
involved a biography of George Washington.
A biography. Okay.
The court said that
Yeah.
while reviewers can quote sections for criticism,
Right.
copying big chunks
Okay.
to create a substitute,
Yeah.
work is infringement.
So a quick quote for a review is okay.
Yeah.
But making a whole competing product is a no-go.
Right.
Got it.
Okay.
So with ChatGPT, is it simply a substitute for the information it was trained on?
Often, yes.
Okay.
Let's say you have a programming question.
Okay, I'm a programmer.
ChatGPT might give you
Sin.
a similar answer to what
Okay.
you'd find on Stack Overflow,
Oh, yeah.
even if the wording is different.
Different words, but same solution,
Exactly. They both serve the same purpose.
which is to solve your programming problem.
To solve your problem, right?
Okay.
Here's a specific example.
Okay.
You're writing code, and you get this weird result when you add point 1 and point 2.
Yeah, the classic flirting point arithmetic thing
Exactly.
where point 1 plus point 2 doesn't actually equal point 3.
Right.
Yeah.
Ask ChatGPT, and it'll probably explain
Okay.
how decimals are represented in computers,
Right.
leading to those rounding errors.
Makes sense.
You'd find a similar explanation on Stack Overflow,
Yeah.
maybe with some more technical details.
But essentially, they're both giving you the same information.
Right. They're acting as substitutes.
Okay, but is substitution always that clear-cut?
It's actually more of a spectrum.
Oh, okay, a spectrum.
So let's stick with programming.
Okay.
Instead of point 1 plus point 2.
Yeah.
What if you ask, why does point 2 plus point 4 also give a weird result?
Okay, so slightly different question.
Right.
But still about the same concept.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Now, to answer this new question,
Yeah.
you'd need to use what you learned
Got
from the original explanation about floating point arithmetic.
Okay,
There might not be an exact answer for the specific question,
right.
but you can apply the principles
To figure it out.
So it's less of a direct substitution and
Mhm.
more like building on knowledge.
Exactly.
Interesting. So the degree of independent thought needed
Uh-huh.
depends on how closely the new question
Yeah.
relates to what the model was trained on.
Right. And you could go even broader,
Okay.
like asking, how are decimals represented in floating point?
Okay. Much broader question.
Right.
Yeah.
Answering that
Mm-hmm.
requires a more comprehensive understanding.
Yeah.
And while the initial explanation might help,
Okay.
it's not a direct substitute.
Right. Okay. So we've got market effects
Right.
and purpose of use covered.
Uh-huh.
What about the type of copyrighted work itself?
Yeah, does that matter?
Does that matter?
It does.
Okay.
But in this case,
Yeah.
it's not likely to be a strong argument in ChatGPT's favor.
Okay.
Most online content,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's text code or images, is protected by copyright in some way.
So no matter what it is,
Right.
it's probably covered.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, and remember, this factor is generally less important overall
Okay.
compared to the market effects
Right.
and the purpose of the use.
All right, got it. Now, what about the amount of the copyrighted work used?
Well, that's a good one.
This feels tricky. ChatGPT is trained on tons of stuff,
Yeah.
but it doesn't usually produce exact copies in its output.
Right.
Where do we draw the line?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it highlights a really common misconception.
Yeah.
Some people think
Yeah?
because ChatGPT's outputs aren't verbatim copies,
Right.
the amount used is negligible.
Like it doesn't count.
Yeah, but that's not how copyright works.
So it's not just about word-for-word copying.
No, copyright protects
Okay.
the creative choices an
Okay.
author makes,
Yeah.
not just the literal words.
So it's about the unique expression,
Exactly.
not just the raw materials.
Right. Think of collage art.
Collage art, okay.
The arrangement of existing images is protected,
Mm-hmm.
even if the individual images aren't.
Right.
Same with writing.
Yeah.
Authors are protected for their specific arrangement of words,
Right.
even though they didn't invent new words.
Interesting. Okay. Starting to see the bigger picture.
Good.
But how do we actually measure these creative choices?
Right.
It seems a bit abstract.
That is a great question, and this is where it gets a bit technical.
Oh, no.
But stick with me.
Okay.
We can actually quantify these choices using information theory.
Information theory. Okay.
Don't worry, I'll break it down.
Lay it on me, information theory. What do I need to know?
The basic unit of information is a bit,
A bit.
a simple yes or no choice.
Okay, yes or no.
Right. And the average amount of information in a distribution is called entropy.
Entropy.
and it's measured in bits.
Okay, so more entropy means more information packed in.
Exactly.
It's okay.
Think of a random string of letters versus a meaningful sentence.
Okay.
The sentence has more information
Right.
because of the specific arrangement of those letters.
It's organized.
It is.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. And what about this term? I've heard mutual information. How does that fit in?
So mutual information, or MI, tells us how much information is shared between two sets of data.
Two sets of data.
Like imagine the original work
Okay.
and the AI's creation.
Okay.
The MI tells you how much information from the original is present in the AI's output.
So high MI means the AI's work is heavily influenced by the original.
Right.
Interesting. Okay.
And for our amount used factor in fair use,
Mm-hmm.
we're specifically interested in
Yeah.
relative mutual information, or RMI.
RMI.
This is the MI compared to the total amount of information in the original work.
Gotcha.
So basically, what proportion of the AI's output comes from the original?
Can you give me a visual for that? This is a lot to wrap my head around.
Sure, picture two overlapping circles.
Okay. Two circles.
The red circle is the original work.
Original work is red.
Blue circle is the AI's output.
AI's blue. Got it.
The overlap is the RMI, the shared information.
Bigger overlap means more of the original is in the AI's creation.
Oh, that helps. Okay.
Good.
So how does all this apply to ChatGPT,
We want to know how much information from the training data.
which is the red circle?
The red circle exactly
Yep.
is present in the model's outputs.
The blue circle.
The blue circle.
Oh,
RMI helps us measure that.
So higher RMI, more likely the model is infringing.
Potentially, yes.
So-
But actually calculating RMI with generative AI is really tricky.
Okay, why is that?
We'd need to estimate the entropy of all possible outputs,
Yeah.
which is pretty much impossible.
So how do we deal with that?
One approach is assuming
Okay.
that the entropy of the model's outputs is equal to the entropy of the training data.
Okay, so we're just going to assume they're the same.
It's a simplification, but it could be reasonable in some cases.
Why would that be reasonable?
Well, think about it. Models that perfectly fit their training data,
Okay.
or those that overfit and memorize it,
Right.
will have the same entropy in their output as the original data.
Makes sense.
Only when they underfit and add extra noise might the output entropy be higher.
So if the model is well-trained or even overfit,
Right,
assuming equal entropy makes sense.
exactly.
Right.
And with that assumption,
Mm-hmm.
we can estimate a lower bound for the RMI.
Okay, a lower bound.
The basic idea
Oh,
is
right.
that if the outputs are predictable
All right.
and structured, meaning low entropy,
entropy.
they're more likely to contain information from the training data.
So even when it seems original, it might still be heavily influenced by the training data.
It is, and that's why analyzing RMI and entropy is so important.
Yeah.
It helps us understand these subtle ways
Okay.
that training data can shape the output.
So we've established that low entropy outputs from models like ChatGPT
Right.
could be a sign of trouble when it comes to copyright.
Definitely.
What actually causes those low entropy outputs?
So there are a few factors.
Okay.
Models don't have to have low entropy,
Okay.
but developers often prefer it
Why?
to make the output more coherent
More coherent.
and reduce what we call hallucinations.
Hallucination.
It's AI jargon for
Yeah.
when the model generates something that's factually incorrect
Okay.
or doesn't make sense in context.
So it's like the AI is going off on a tangent,
Exactly.
making things up.
Right.
Yeah.
And these hallucinations
Yeah.
often come from randomness
Oh.
in the model's generation process,
Ah.
the same randomness that leads to higher entropy. Okay.
So developers try to rein that in,
Yeah, okay.
which can lead to more predictable
Right.
and structured outputs.
So it's like a balancing act.
It is.
More creativity, more risk of weird outputs.
Right.
More structure, less risk, but potentially less original.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And one specific technique that can lead to low entropy outputs is data repetition during training.
Okay, data repetition during training.
The model is essentially shown
Yeah.
the same data points
Yeah.
over and over and over again.
So it's like drilling the same information in.
Yes.
Doesn't that lead to memorization rather than true understanding?
You're right.
Yeah.
Too much repetition
Okay.
can cause the model to memorize and
Ah.
regurgitate data points
Right.
instead of learning the underlying concepts.
So rote learning instead of real learning.
Exactly.
Got it. Any examples of how this plays out in practice?
Sure. Imagine training GPT-2, a predecessor to ChatGPT, on Shakespeare.
Okay. GPT-2 on Shakespeare.
Train it once on each text.
Once the outputs might be novel,
Right.
but probably incoherent.
Right.
Train it 10 times,
10 times
the same text.
Oh, wow.
And it might start memorizing
Okay.
and spitting out entire passages verbatim.
So instead of new Shakespeare,
Right.
it's just copying the old stuff.
Exactly.
Wow.
And there's this interesting middle ground.
Okay.
Train it 5 times,
Oh,
and you might get output that's
Yeah.
somewhere between regurgitation
Okay.
and true generation.
Interesting.
It might borrow phrases and structures,
Okay.
but combine them in new ways.
So it's starting to get the style,
Yeah,
but hasn't fully memorized everything.
exactly.
Gotcha.
And even then, we can use entropy measurements to
Ah.
estimate how much information from the training data is
Yeah.
present in the output.
So even when it's not blatant copying, we can still see how much it's relying on the training data.
Absolutely, that's the key.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Okay. Makes sense. You mentioned another technique, reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF.
Yeah.
RLHF.
How does that contribute to low entropy outputs?
So RLHF is a way to fine-tune these models.
Fine tune.
It's like training a dog.
training a dog.
You reward the model
Okay.
for producing outputs that humans like.
So you're training it to be more human-like in its writing.
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
And one goal of RLHF is to reduce those hallucinations we talked about.
Right. Those moments when the model goes off the rails.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And those hallucinations often come from randomness
Okay.
in the model.
Yeah.
The very thing that leads to high entropy.
So by reducing hallucinations, you're indirectly reducing entropy
Yeah.
and making the output more predictable.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
In theory, a model with zero entropy,
Zero entropy.
meaning completely predictable outputs,
Right.
could have zero hallucinations.
So it's like a perfect writing machine,
Kind of, yeah.
always giving you exactly what you expect.
But the catch is
Yeah.
a model with zero entropy would just be a database.
It would lose its ability to combine information
Right.
in new ways.
No, it's a trade-off again. We want creativity,
We do.
but we also want it to be reliable.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
RLHF helps find that balance,
Mm-hmm.
but it often leans
Look forward.
towards lower entropy
Well-
and more predictable output.
All right, so RLHF is another factor
It is.
that can push these models towards potential copyright issues.
Right.
Can you give me some concrete examples of how this plays out with ChatGPT?
Sure, let's try a few different queries with ChatGPT and
Okay.
see how RLHF might be affecting its output.
What kind of queries are we talking about?
Let's start with something simple,
Okay.
like asking ChatGPT to explain a scientific concept
Okay.
or give a historical summary.
Right.
These often result in pretty structured and predictable answers,
Okay.
even if they're not word-for-word copies from the training data.
Right.
The language is often similar to what you'd find in a textbook.
So it's like ChatGPT is playing it safe, sticking to familiar patterns.
Exactly. And if we measure the entropy of those responses,
Yeah.
we'll probably find that it's relatively low,
Okay.
indicating a strong influence from the training data.
Interested, does the entropy change depending on what we ask it to do?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Ask it to write a creative story
Mm-hmm.
or a poem,
Yeah.
and the entropy might be higher
Higher.
because it has more freedom
Yeah.
to play with language and ideas.
So the more creative the task, the lower the risk of copying.
Generally, yes.
Okay.
But even in creative tasks,
Right.
it still might be drawing on information from
Yeah.
its training data.
Always walking that tightrope between originality and potential infringement.
Exactly.
Wow.
And one really interesting example is humor.
Humor?
Ask ChatGPT to tell a joke.
Tell me a joke.
ChatGPT.
And the entropy is likely to be very low.
Why is that?
Jokes rely on setup and punchline,
Right.
predictable structures
Yeah.
that a
Yeah.
language model can easily learn.
ChatGPT probably has a ton of jokes memorized
Yeah.
from its training data,
Yeah.
and it might just spit those out when asked.
So it's more mimicry than true comedic genius.
Exactly. It's
Wow.
an easy way to spot potential copyright problems.
Yeah.
If a joke sounds familiar,
Right.
there's a good chance ChatGPT just lifted it from somewhere.
Jokes are a high-risk zone. Got it.
Yeah, be careful with the jokes.
So the takeaway here is that entropy varies depending on the task.
Right.
The more structured and predictable the output,
Mm-hmm.
the lower the entropy, and the more likely it is that the model is relying heavily on its training data,
Exactly.
potentially running into copyright issues.
Uh-huh.
So it's a sliding scale.
It is.
The more creative and unpredictable ChatGPT gets, the lower the risk.
Right.
But even then, there's always that possibility.
Always that possibility.
Borrowing too much from what it's learned.
Exactly. It's a fascinating and complex area.
Yeah, it really is.
And as generative AI becomes more common, these issues are only going to get bigger.
Okay, so considering all the factors we've talked about,
Yeah.
market effects, purpose of use,
Mm-hmm.
nature of the work amount used, is it likely that ChatGPT's use of its training data would be considered fair use under current law?
Ooh, that's the big
So
question.
what's the verdict?
Based on our analysis,
Okay.
considering the potential market harm,
Right.
the purpose of ChatGPT,
Mm-hmm.
and the substantial amount of training data
Yeah,
that seems to be shaping its output,
right.
it's not looking good
Not looking good.
for the fair use argument.
Uh-oh.
And this probably applies to a lot of other generative AI products out there.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. We've learned about the 4 factors of fair use,
Yeah.
how they relate to generative AI,
Mm-hmm.
and specifically how this all applies to ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like the legal landscape is still pretty murky
It is.
when it comes to these powerful technologies.
Yeah, we're still figuring it all out.
But before we wrap up, I want to encourage you to think about something we haven't explicitly discussed.
Okay.
We've been focusing on ChatGPT,
Right.
a text-based AI.
Uh-huh.
What about other generative AI tools?
Oh, good point.
What about image generation,
Image generation.
music creation,
Yeah.
or even code generation?
Code too.
How might these arguments apply to those?
That's a fantastic point.
Yeah.
All the arguments we've explored today,
Right.
the concepts of fair use, market impact, and information theory, they're all relevant to all kinds of generative AI.
It's a field that's changing so quickly,
So quickly.
and we're only just beginning to understand the legal and ethical implications.
We are just at the beginning.
It really is fascinating.
It is.
And there's so much more to explore.
so much more.
We'll definitely be diving deeper into these topics in the future.
Looking forward to it.
But for now,
Yes.
thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
We hope you've gained a better understanding of the complexities of fair use and generative AI.
It's been a pleasure diving into this topic with you. Remember, this is a constantly evolving area,
Mm-hmm.
so stay curious.
Be curious.
And we'll see you next time. Yeah, it really is a vast,
Uncharted.
uncharted territory, isn't it?
Yeah.
These same principles apply
Yeah.
whether we're talking about an AI generating images
Right.
based on existing artwork or composing music that sounds like a famous composer.
Yeah, it feels like the Wild West out there.
It does. It does.
So we've established that generative AI
Right.
raises some big legal questions.
Definitely.
Well, let's take a step back for a second
Okay.
and just appreciate how amazing this technology is.
It is amazing.
It's still kind of mind-blowing
I know.
that we can have these conversations with AI.
Yeah.
That it can write human quality text,
It's crazy.
compose music, even create art.
It really is a testament
Yeah.
to human ingenuity and how fast AI is advancing.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit
Yeah.
and talk about the practical implications of these legal challenges.
All right, let's get practical.
What does this all mean for creators?
Creators.
How can they protect their work in this new landscape?
So creators need to be aware
Okay.
that their work could be used in ways they might not have anticipated,
Okay.
especially as training data for these AI models.
So it's not just about protecting your work
Right.
from traditional plagiarism or
Yeah.
copyright infringement,
Mm-hmm.
but also from being used as fuel
Yes.
for these AI systems.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's tricky because the current legal framework
Sure.
isn't really set up to handle these new ways of using creative work.
So what can creators do?
What can they do?
Are there any practical steps they can take to protect themselves?
Well, one option
Okay.
is to be very careful about where they share their work online.
Online. All
They
right.
might want to steer clear of platforms or websites that are known for scraping data for AI training.
So it's about being more mindful of your digital footprint.
Precisely.
Okay.
Another option is to use copyright notices
Right.
and licensing agreements that
Right.
clearly state how their work can be used.
Gotcha.
That can help deter unauthorized use
Right.
and give them legal options
Okay.
if their work is used without permission.
So being proactive
Yeah.
and setting clear boundaries from the start.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's important for creators to stay informed
Mm-hmm.
about how the legal landscape is evolving
Right, because it's changing so fast.
rapidly
Yeah.
and to participate in discussions
Okay.
about how to protect their rights in the age of AI.
So it's about being educated
Yes.
and advocating for policies that protect creators' interests.
Absolutely. It's a collective effort.
Yeah.
Creators, policymakers, and tech people need to work together to find solutions
Okay.
that balance innovation with the need to protect creative rights.
Okay, so we talked about creators.
Right.
What about people who are using AI-generated content?
The users.
Yeah, what should they be aware of?
Consumers also need to be thoughtful
Yeah.
about the content they're engaging with.
Yeah.
Not all AI-generated content is created equal.
Right.
Some models might be trained on high-quality data.
Yeah.
It's been ethically sourced.
Ethically sourced.
Well, others might use scrape data
Right.
that includes copyrighted material.
So it's like buying a product from a well-known brand
Yeah.
versus a knockoff.
Exactly.
You need to know where it's coming from
You do.
and what the quality's like.
That's a great analogy.
Okay.
Consumers should be critical thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
Ask questions about where the content came from,
Right.
the training data used,
Yeah.
and the considerations behind the model's development.
So we shouldn't just accept
Yeah.
everything the AI produces as valid
Right.
or trustworthy.
Be skeptical.
Yeah, we need to be more careful consumers
We do.
of this technology.
Is that correctly?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about creators and consumers.
Right.
What about the bigger picture?
The big picture.
How is this technology likely to change the way we live, work, and create?
That's a question a lot of experts are trying to answer.
Yeah.
Generative AI could potentially revolutionize a bunch of industries, from entertainment and content creation to education and research.
So it's not just about writing funny poems or making cool images.
It's bigger than that.
Yeah, it could change how we learn,
It could.
how we work,
Ugh.
even how we discover new knowledge.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Imagine a world
Yeah.
where educational content is personalized
Okay.
and created on demand,
Well,
tailored to each student's
yeah,
learning style and pace.
that's amazing. It's like having a personal tutor
It is.
available 24/7,
Right there with you.
adapting to your individual needs
Exactly.
and helping you learn more effectively.
More effectively.
And in research,
Reviews.
imagine AI systems
Ah,
that can analyze huge data sets
huge data sets.
and find patterns that humans might miss.
Yeah. Augmenting our abilities.
Yeah, leading to new scientific discoveries and medical breakthroughs.
It's like having a research assistant with superpowers.
Yeah.
Able to sift through mountains of data
Yeah.
and pinpoint the key insights.
The possibilities are truly mind-blowing.
They are.
But it's critical that
Yeah.
we approach these advancements responsibly.
Responsibly.
So it's about using the power of generative AI for good
For good.
while being mindful of potential risks
Right.
and making sure it benefits society as a whole.
It's a balancing act
It is a balancing act.
that requires collaboration and dialogue
Yeah.
across different fields and perspectives.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From the details of copyright law
Mhm.
to the incredible potential of generative AI.
The potential is huge.
It's a fascinating
It is.
and rapidly evolving field,
Perfectly.
and there's still a lot to learn.
So much more to learn.
It's a journey of exploration and discovery that we're all taking together.
all together.
Well, I don't know about you,
Mhm.
but my brain is feeling a bit full right now.
A little bit full.
It's a lot to process.
I agree. It's a lot to take in,
Yeah.
but it's worth the effort.
It is.
Understanding generative AI
Mm-hmm.
is crucial for navigating the future,
Right.
both for individuals and for society as a whole.
All right, we're going to wrap up this deep dive
Okay.
with some final thoughts
Kind of thought.
and key takeaways
Anyways,
after a quick message.
let's bring up
Our sponsor.
sponsor.
Stay tuned. Welcome back.
We're back.
Ready to wrap up
Wrap it up.
our deep dive into fair use
Fair use.
and generative AI.
I don't know about you.
I've learned a ton
So much to learn.
about the legal
Legal.
and technological forces
It's fascinating.
shaping this exciting and sometimes confusing field.
Yeah, I agree. It's been a whirlwind tour.
Yes.
From copyright law to information theory, we've explored some pretty complex concepts today,
We have.
but hopefully in a way that makes sense and sparks some further thinking.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest takeaways for me
Takeaways.
is that we're still in the very early stages
Early stages.
of figuring all this out.
Figuring it out.
There are no easy answers
No easy answer.
when it comes to generative AI and copyright,
Nope.
and it's going to require ongoing conversation and collaboration
Definitely.
to navigate these challenges.
Collaboration is key.
So as we wrap things up,
Okay, wrapping up.
What are some key points
Key points.
listeners should keep in mind
Things to remember.
as they interact with generative AI, whether they're creators, users, or just curious observers?
Well, I think the most important thing is awareness.
Awareness.
Understanding the potential legal and practical implications of using these tools, especially when it comes to copyright.
Copyright.
We've talked about the concept of fair use,
Yeah,
the importance of data licensing agreements,
right.
and the potential for AI-generated content to blur the lines of originality.
So it's about being informed
Informed.
and educated
Yeah.
about the technology
Educate.
and recognizing that it's not a free-for-all.
Definitely not a free-for-all.
Exactly. And coupled with that awareness,
Mm-hmm.
I think critical thinking is key.
Critical thinking.
Don't just blindly accept
Don't be blind.
everything an AI generates as truth
Right.
or originality.
Question everything.
Ask questions.
Question.
Where did this content come from?
Where'd it come from?
What data was the model trained on?
Yes.
What data could there be biases embedded in the output?
Biases.
So approach AI-generated content
Right.
with the same kind of healthy skepticism
Skepticism.
we apply to other forms of media and information.
Yes. Good.
Absolutely. And for creators out there,
Creators, to be proactive.
be proactive about protecting your work.
Protect your work.
Think carefully about where you share your creations online.
Where you share.
Use copyright notices.
Copyright notices.
Consider licensing agreements.
Licensing.
And stay engaged in the conversation
Say engaged.
about how to best protect your rights as this technology evolves.
It's always changing.
So for creators, it's about taking control and
That's a
setting
key.
clear boundaries.
Boundaries.
Great advice.
Yeah.
Well, we've covered an incredible amount of ground today.
We have
From the intricacies of copyright law
intricacies.
to the mind-boggling potential of generative AI.
Mind-boggling.
It's been a real pleasure
The pleasure was all mine.
exploring these complex and fascinating topics with you.
Complex and fascinating.
We hope this deep dive
Deep dive.
has sparked some curiosity
Curiosity.
and given you a better
My
understanding
understanding.
of this rapidly evolving landscape.
Rapidly evolving.
The world of generative AI is constantly changing.
It is.
So stay curious,
They inform.
stay informed, and keep those critical thinking skills sharp.
Sharp skills.
And until next time, thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.